Hey, JB here from Squirrel. Another one of our little videos. This time I've got my trusty financial calculator and we're going to talk about how much can I borrow, and thought, hey, actually, why not grab a whiteboard and we'll just doodle as we go. Look, the main thing is it all comes down to servicing. It comes down to income, less expenses, how much money have we got available to pay a mortgage, what happens if interest rates go up, can we still afford it, what happens if our circumstances change, can we still afford it. Look, that's basically the premise of how much we can borrow. So let's get stuck into it. Let's throw a scenario in there. So we'll put a couple into the picture. So the first thing we need to understand is how much they earn. So let's assume that one of you earns, we'll go for a nice Auckland salary, 90,000 a year. So that's going to be about It's going to be about 5,000 per month. Maybe a bit lower than that if you had a student loan, for example. And let's say the other person is on 60,000. That'll end up being about 4,000 a month. So that's cool. So we've got 9,000 a month of after-tax income. The next critical piece to understand here is what sort of expenses you're going to have. And look, this is where most people get really unrealistic, and including us. We tend to underestimate our expenses, and I'd encourage you to actually have a look at your bank statements and kind of try and figure it out, because that's going to be the difference between living on baked beans and rice and actually having a property that you can afford. Or at least understanding what the trade-off's going to be in terms of how much you realistically have to reduce your expenses by to afford the sort of property that you're looking to buy. So as far as expenses are concerned for a couple, kind of rule of thumb for me would be sort of somewhere in the vicinity of around 3,000 to 3,500 per month would be about right. And when you actually start to work through your numbers, you'll realise that you're actually probably spending a hell of a lot more than that. And so even at 3,500, there's quite a bit of sacrifice there. So if we take 3,500 out, that's leaving 5,500 of income. That one could say is discretionary. We haven't included clothing, holidays, upgrading the car, any of that sort of stuff here. So bear in mind that this 5,500, whilst we call it discretionary, the reality is there's a lot of stuff that you need in your life that you would consider not to be discretionary that we've got still sitting there. So if we're at 5,500, the easy thing for me is just to go 5,500 a month as a payment amount, put it onto a 30-year loan term. Now, at the moment we've got interest rates at 4%, but clearly they're not going to stay there. So generally speaking, we'd like to say to clients, let's test you on an interest rate of say 7% to make sure that you can afford the mortgage in the future. So we'll load up a 7% interest rate. That's giving us a loan amount of 826,000 being the maximum that you could borrow, and that's with 150,000 of gross income. Rule of thumb on this is 5 times your income. So what you'll see there, gross income 150 times 5, that's 750,000. It's actually coming in pretty close to what we've just worked out, 826. Could you afford 826,000? Yes and no. The thing I want to draw you to is living expenses. That's pretty tight. And in reality, you would probably find that by the time you include clothes and allow for other things, you're actually probably spending more like 4,500 a month, in which case that's dropping to 4,500 a month. And at 4,500 a month, your borrowing power has dropped significantly to 676,000. And therein lies the challenge, particularly in Auckland. Relatively small reduction, $1,000 or 20% reduction in discretionary income is having a pretty sizable chunk impact in terms of the amount that you can borrow. But again, it's probably suggesting that the low amount is more realistic. So hopefully that makes sense. You can run this all through borrowing calculators, but in my experience, it's really good to sit down with someone and go through this sort of stuff so you can have a more robust discussion about it. The critical piece that you really need to wrap your head around is what your expenses genuinely look like and what the implications are going to be in terms of the amount that you borrow against what you've got available to spend, not only now but in the future if you're faced with higher interest rates, or as in this case, you lose some of this income because you have one of those turn up. So look, that's it for me now. That's the sort of process that we go through as a mortgage advisor when we're sitting down with our clients. If you want to know more or talk to us, just give us a call, book in to see one of our advisors. Talk to you soon. Cheers.